life is either on purpose or off purpose. Every moment is either on purpose or off purpose. And every moment off purpose is a moment wasted because you can never get that back.
So you have a passion for fitness and the desire to start your own business, but launching a massively successful fitness business is extremely complex. The systems, operations, hiring, firing, coaching, sales, and marketing are critical to success. Where do you even start? This show will give you the answers. Here is Bedros Keuilian and Bryce Henson, your hosts of the Fitness Franchise Podcast, a show dedicated to helping fitness entrepreneurs launch and grow successful gyms.
Hey friends, welcome back to another incredible episode, and man, do we have a good one, as a dear friend is in the studio who's also an author and an international speaker and the host of That You Don't Learn in College podcast. Now, taking a step back, he started his business after quitting his multiple six-figure salary position, for that matter, to start high-impact coaching. And quickly, within 3 months, he went from 0 to 6 figures, and then fast forward, went from 6 figures a month all the way to 5 million annual sales after 4 short years. Looking ahead, Zanders trainings have impacted over 50,000 people in over 22 countries with over 400 organizations and counting. Zander Fryer, welcome to the show, my friend.
Thanks for having me, brother.
Dude, man.
Excited to be here.
So a lot to talk about today. You are a very well-accomplished guy. I'm honored and privileged to call you a friend.
I like to pretend I've done some things, at least.
There you go. But before we kind of get to the main story, give us a backstory. How did this all come to be?
It just happened. It appeared out of nowhere. It was really easy. No, I think I've had a really interesting journey, and obviously part of the reason why you don't learn in college is such a big part of my life. You know, when I was in high school, I was really good at math. I was really good at math and sciences. So the proverbial, like, you know, what are you going to do with your life was a pretty easy question to answer. I was going to be an engineer. Everybody told me, like, oh, you know, engineers make great money. There'll never be a shortage of engineers. So go to school for engineering. So I went to UCLA for engineering, because I loved math. Everybody loves doing math, right? No.
Right.
Yeah, I hated math, but it was what people told me to do. I got lucky in college in that, because I didn't come from a very wealthy family or anything, I paid for my own degree. So I joined the Air Force. I joined Air Force ROTC to actually pay for my degree. And that was actually my first run-in with really doing something like purposeful in my life. I found a lot of connection and alignment being a leader in the Air Force. So, as I was going through Air Force ROTC, I actually, at the Air Force version of boot camp, which is called field training, I actually got the Top Gun Award. So, I was quickly painting the rest of my life as being a leader in the military.
Really?
Yeah, so I had my pilot slot, right before I was graduating, I was going to be a pilot. It's funny, looking back now, the guy that I was always, me and him were always like 1 and 2 in the detachment. He now flies F-22. So awesome job. But what happened is my senior year, I made the incredibly intelligent decision of driving home one night after about 3 beers and got a DUI. So,
and this is senior in college?
Senior year in college.
At UCLA?
At UCLA. I've got the next 20 years of my life planned to be a pilot in the Air Force. And I made the decision that, I was going to drive home after a few beers and got pulled over, blew a .09.
Which is just over.
Just over. I still remember the officer who pulled me over, and he did the whole light test and like all of that sort of stuff. And he's like, yeah, you're probably below like a .04, but I got to breathalyze you because I'm pretty new. And so I was like, okay. And so, I blew in a thing and it goes .09, and he just looks at me, he goes, let's try it again. Like, really? He did not want to give me a DUI. And, I did it again. I blew a .09. And I remember that moment, obviously being in that moment was like, it was hell, right? Like, totally. I just watched the next 20 years of my life completely erased by a stupid decision that I made. And I don't think I had ever drank a beer and driven before in my life. That was like the first time, and I happened to have 3 beers and just enough to put me over. But, needless to say, that ended my Air Force career pretty quickly. So I got kicked out of the Air Force, and now I'm a 21, 22-year-old kid with this engineering degree. So I did what any other lost 21, 22-year-old kid would do. I took all this this degree and all this training I had, and I joined Cisco Systems, I joined the corporate world, right? So I went to the corporate world. I worked with Cisco Systems for about 6 years.
In LA?
So I actually I moved from Los Angeles to North Carolina. Cisco has a program where they take the top graduates from around the world, literally, and fly them all to North Carolina and put them in a little pod and train them as engineers and salespeople. So I got blessed with probably what was maybe the best opportunity out of all of my friends out of college. I had friends go into iBanking. I had friends become lawyers and doctors and all of these things. But like everybody was looking at me. They're like, wow, like Zander made it. Like
well done.
Zander got successful. So, I had this amazing career with Cisco over the next 6 years where, I was working with companies like Disney, NBC, Facebook, Verizon, Sony, you name it. Like any of those big name companies, I probably worked with them, selling them networking equipment. I held a quota of about $130 million as a kid in his mid-20s. At this point, I had moved back to Los Angeles. I was that guy that was driving around in a BMW, flying around the country first class. I had what everybody told me was success.
At 25 years old?
At this point, I'm maybe 26, 27.
Okay.
I had what everybody told me was success, but I never felt successful. Like I felt empty. I felt like, everybody told me like, this is what you're supposed to build your life for. Like,
yeah.
But, I'd feel like this can't be it, right? So I'd go out every weekend to the bars and I'd buy everybody rounds of drinks because I was trying to fill that gap for me, right? But this was now about 5 years ago. I had a conversation with a mentor of mine, and he asked me, and this was an entrepreneur mentor of mine, because at this point I was really searching. I was like, this can't be it. Like I'm on this track. I need more. I was trying to figure it out.
Even though you have like what everyone would think, and like,
that was the thing, right? It's like every single one of my friends, if every single one of them, my family too, like every single one of them would have been like, Zander has done it. Like Zander's got, at this point I'm making somewhere around $250K a year. As a kid in his mid to late 20s, right? Like I'm really doing well for myself according to everybody else, but like didn't feel like it. So I had a conversation with a mentor of mine, and he actually asked me, he asked me the brutal questions that nobody else was willing to ask me. So he said, Zander, like you could do anything. Like what would you do if you couldn't fail? And I think that was the first question that really kind of opened things up for me. Like, what would you do if you couldn't fail? And I was like, honestly, like the thing that I miss the most is like mentoring people. I miss mentoring people like I got to in the Air Force. And I do it maybe 10% of the time at Cisco. I mentor early in career people, but I don't actually get to do it that much. And he goes, well, why don't you do it full time? And I was like, well, what do you mean? And he's like, well, yeah, why don't you make that your life and your career? And I'm like, well, I didn't even know you could do that. And I was like, but also, like, I have this amazing career at Cisco. I'm on track to be one of the youngest directors in recent history. Like, I've got great momentum. I've got great clients. Like, I didn't have a dead end job. Like, there's a lot of people that feel like they're in a dead end job. I did not have that.
Right.
I had a very good job. I was very happy with what I was doing.
Yeah.
Right. But he basically helped point out to me, and what he said was, Zander, just because you're good at something does not mean you should do it. And just because there's a path for you, does that mean you should follow it? And he kind of reminded me, he's like, you realize that you only get one life, right? Like we all have a certain amount of time on this earth. And when you get to my age, he was, I was 27 at the time. He was maybe 37, maybe a decade older than I was. He's like, when you get to my age, you realize very quickly, like it goes by a lot faster than you think.
And not to totally derail this, but what was his background in terms of
So his background was health and wellness.
Okay.
So he was a health and wellness entrepreneur and speaker. He had some books. He had some products that were in the, the holistic health space. And so he used to tour the US and Europe and basically talk and sell his books and things like that. But basically, he pointed out, he's like, Zander, when you get to my age, you'll realize that, life is either on purpose or off purpose. Every moment is either on purpose or off purpose. And every moment off purpose is a moment wasted because you can never get that back. Right? And he said, Zander, do you know the difference between you and me? And I said, well, you make a ton more money than I do, because he made 7 figures at that point.
No joke.
And he's like, the difference between you and me is I see a scared kid just dreaming a dream, and I'm actually living mine. And that was the first time that I ever had someone be real enough with me to help me realize, like, yeah, I had all this success. I had this confidence on the outside, but I was actually just scared. Like I was scared to go do something that I knew I needed to do, and realized that I only have one life. Like I don't have a choice. I have to go pursue something more. And I remember that was on a Saturday, and that conversation was lubricated by a little bit of tequila, I think. So, but
perfect timing as we shoot today on Cinco de Mayo. So.
Yeah, exactly.
There you go.
So I basically I took that with me, and I couldn't stop thinking about it all of Sunday, and then all of Sunday I'm just thinking about it, and then Monday morning rolls around, and the first thing is 8 a.m. call with the Disney team. So 8 to 9, and I can't stop thinking I'm never getting that hour back. And then 9 to 10 with the NBC team, and I can't stop thinking I'm never getting that hour back. 10 to 11 with the sales team, I'm never getting that hour back. 11 to 12 with the engineering team, I'm never getting that hour back. By lunchtime, I'm never getting that morning back. Like that whole morning of mine is gone forever. And it was doing something that didn't really matter to me. So I called up my manager and I was like, Frank, I'm done.
No.
Yeah.
That Monday.
And that was it. So that's how I quit. That was 5 years ago. No idea what I was doing. I took, at that point, what was my life savings. And everybody always kind of asked me, they're like, yeah, but you made so much money. So you had this big pile of cash sitting in the garage, and you just took that and you were able to do whatever the hell you guys, I'm a millennial. Like I spent all of that money at the bar, traveling. Like I had about 3 months worth of living expenses saved up when I quit my job, and I had no idea what I was doing. But the one thing that I knew was that I could not waste any more time. I could figure out how to make more money. I could figure that part out. I could not figure out how to get more time back. So I had to stop wasting time and focus heavily on doing something that really mattered to me.
It's interesting because you have an engineering background. So when I hear that first...
This is terrifying for an engineering mind, by the way.
Right.
Terrifying.
So how does it even work? But then as I kind of listen to you, you're like, well, from a calculated perspective, I realized that I made the decision because I wasn't getting that time back.
Yes.
So that became the...
Well, if you think like those were the two beliefs that I had was like, okay, the first belief is like I can never get my time back. So every moment has to be purposeful
or
impactful in some way. It has to build towards something more purposeful or impactful, right? And then the other thing that I kind of realized was everything is figure outable, right? Whether or not I know it right now, everything in life is figure outable, right? And so if everything is figure outable and I can't waste any more time on doing something unpurposeful, then it's like, okay, I don't really, no matter what fear is in the way, like I have to do this.
Yeah.
So.
Woo. All right. So, loaded, but the plot thickens. So now, you make that decision, you have that conversation on a Saturday, you make that decision on a Monday. Walk us through how high impact coaching came to be. And obviously, for the viewers at home, Zander and I are good friends and kind of lead the witness here, but want to kind of give you some insight onto this guy's incredible background.
Yeah.
I also know that you had, one of your best friends that, was kind of in the mix as well. So if you can kind of share that next step of the journey.
Absolutely. So, I quit my job. Like I mentioned, I don't have a ton of money saved up, maybe about I think at that point it was somewhere between 20 and 25K. And I had some pretty expensive taste of that type. I drove a BMW. I lived in a nice place in Venice. So, you can burn through 25K pretty quickly when you do that. So I decided to burn through it even quicker. And I took all 25 of it and I spent it on mentorship within the first 30 days. So again, it kind of came back to that idea, I'll figure out how to make money. I'll figure out the money side of things. The one thing I can't figure out is how to get more time back.
Good on you, man.
So within the first 30 days, I had hired every mentor, every program that I could. Not all of them were great, right? But my goal was to make sure that I got every possible. I'd spent over $100,000, $150,000 or whatever to get a college degree that did not take me where I wanted to go. Why would I hesitate to invest in myself to learn the skills that would actually allow me to build a life of freedom and impact and the financial situation that I wanted to have, where I had control over my finances and myself. So that was one of the biggest things for me is I invested in mentorship as quick as I possibly could and as much as I possibly could. So I ended up putting myself into about 20K in debt. I maxed out a couple of credit cards, so spent $25,000, maxed out a couple of credit cards, all within the first 90 days.
Holy smokes.
And I was about 2 weeks away from not being able to make rent. And it was like 2 weeks away from not being able to make rent. And I remember having a partner, a Cisco partner, actually reach out to me and basically saying, hey, Zander, we know that you're out of Cisco now. We'd love to get you a consulting role with our company. We'll pay you 10 grand a month. And all you have to do is be a name on our roster and make introductions to the companies that you have relationships at, like NBC, Disney, Facebook, because I was worth that much to people.
Wow.
Just for doing that. And they're like, it'll probably take 10 hours a week, right? That contract looked really enticing when you're $20,000 in debt and not able to pay rent in about 3 weeks.
Zander, I think that offer look enticing for the vast majority of the planets.
Yes.
So
Yeah.
putting that on the table.
Yeah. But I have this thing, and it's, I talk about it in my TEDx. Every choice we make comes from either a place of fear or comes from a place of purpose. Mm-hmm. And I remember when I had that contract, I was like, yes, this is going to be the thing that saves me, and this is going to be the thing that keeps me. And I remember driving home with that contract, and I remember thinking, am I making this decision out of a place of purpose, or am I making this decision out of a place of fear? And it was clear to me, I was making that decision out of a place of fear.
Yeah.
And so I ended up not signing that contract. The next week, I enrolled my first client as a coach. So I was starting a coaching business at this point. This is how high impact coaching came to be.
And you learned the infrastructure to do that through the coaching that you purchased.
Through all the coaching that I purchased, I learned how to coach. I learned how to get into the online marketing space. I learned how to sell. I learned all of those things. Now, I already had a little bit of sales background.
You did that at Cisco, yeah.
But I learned how to transition that into this B2C world.
Okay.
Right? And I took, again, not all of that, like you mentioned, not all of it came from that. Some of it came from over here, and I was able to take all these little pieces and combine it into this one thing. And literally that next week, I enrolled my first client at $2,700. And then the next week, I enrolled a client at $3,500. Then it was $4,500. Then it was $6,000. And so, within that next month, I had made, whatever it was, 13 or 14 grand. And I was able to pay all my bills and actually start paying off my debt. The month after that was $17,000. Then it was $24,000, $32,000, $42,000. And it just started going up from there. And a lot of that, I think, was because I had the balls, for lack of a better way of putting it, to face the fear and just stick with the thing and keep going.
Now, when you're in kind of getting granular to high impact coaching, how that kind of came to be, when you're enrolling these coaching clients, but you're teaching them actually how to be coaches in a variety of disciplines.
So when I first started, it was actually just life coaching. So the first business was actually shit you don't learn in college, which has now come full form and come back. But it was literally just life coaching, helping people in careers that were lacking purpose and lacking direction, helping them get clear on what that next step was in their career. So it was a combination of life coaching and career coaching, and that's really what got me to the first 30, 40 grand a month.
Yeah.
Learning how to sell that, and it was when I was doing that, it took me about 6 months total to get to that point, right? And that was when I had a lot of other coaches reaching out to me, basically being like, hey, you just did in 5 months what I've been trying to do for 5 years. How'd you do it? And so that's when I started working with other coaches, right? Because, I realized, okay, there's this massive audience out there of people that know they want to have a bigger impact on the world. They know they want to help people, whether it's in the fitness or health space, whether it's in the relationship space. But nobody ever taught them how to business, right? And being a good coach is not enough, right? To have a coaching business, there's coaching and there's business.
Cool.
And the business actually comes first.
Yes.
Right? And so I realized, if I was able to learn this, I can now go teach this to all these coaches that are not getting this support. It's something like 95% of life coaches will actually never make it full time. And it's not because they're not great coaches. It's just because they never learn the business side of it.
The business aspect.
Yeah, that's it.
But specifically in the business, because you're a lot of things, and when I think of you, I think of a high-performing sales consultant, a high-performing coaching consultant. Is it the business aspect? Is it the sales aspect? Is it?
Yeah, all of the above.
All of the above.
Right? So, to be honest, the first and most important thing is you can never have a coaching business, or any business for that matter, if you don't learn how to sell.
Yeah.
Right?
Mission
sales.
critical.
Yeah, sales is the first skill that you have to have. Right? So, some people say marketing. Well, what's marketing? Marketing is selling through, video or the written word, right? So it's all selling, right? So you have to learn that. And until you've mastered selling,
Mm-hmm.
you never get the opportunity to coach. Mm-hmm. Like that's the truth.
Let's dive into that, because I mean, you talked about, okay, you learned it from Cisco, and you've actually, here we're at Fit Body Bootcamp headquarters. We're shooting this, and you've actually trained not only our franchising sales team, but you've also trained our owners as well.
Yeah.
Dive a little bit more into like the sales aspect. How did you actually acquire those skills?
Yeah. So it's super interesting, and you've probably heard this story before, but the way that I approach sales is very different than a lot of people, because I think sales gets a really negative connotation.
It does.
Right? And so one of the things that I always tell people is that sales, in my opinion, sales and leadership are actually the exact same thing.
How so?
So either way you look at it, sales and leadership is about influencing others to take a purposeful action, often in the face of fear. Right? Now, sales and leadership, what most people don't realize. So if I were to say one of those is positive and one of those is negative, which would you pick?
Leadership's positive,
Leadership's positive, sales is negative.
Yep.
Right? Because everybody's been sold. They think of, the greasy, grimy salesperson. I always think of like the movie Matilda and the Danny DeVito character who sells lemons. And then like leadership, you think of like, like a great leader, someone who's doing positive things. Well, I hate to say it, but Hitler was a phenomenal leader. Phenomenal leader.
Yeah.
Did some terrible things.
Horrible things.
Terrible things.
Channeled that, leadership
but
in a
phenomenal leader.
Yeah.
Martin Luther King, one of the best salesmen of a generation. He sold an entire generation on an idea. Where would we be without Martin Luther King?
But you don't think of him
you don't think of him as a salesperson, and you don't think of Hitler as a leader. The reality is both sales and leadership are tools. And they can be used by good people for good things or bad people for bad things, right? And that's the reality. Sales and leadership are both all about influence. Now, if you use one of them to influence people to become healthier and happier and wealthier and more fulfilled, whether it's sales or leadership, that's good.
Yeah.
If you're doing that same thing to go the other direction, it's bad.
Yeah.
But sales and leadership overall are all relatively the same things.
Yeah, about influence.
About influence.
Yeah, I love it.
Yeah.
Well, good stuff, and that's super important for our audience to know, because I would say the two skills, actually probably three, but you kind of incorporated marketing within sales.
Yeah.
But much of our audience are interested in becoming a coach, launching a fitness business, et cetera. And really, at the end of the day, you need to learn how to market, you need to learn how to sell, and you need to learn how to lead. If I can unpack what I've learned in the decade of basically being in the fitness industry, that's what you need to do, and really, that's what you've teed up.
When you look at Bedros, right? Like Bedros started out as a phenomenal salesperson. Now Bedros is a phenomenal leader as well. You wonder why those two things are correlated. It's because it's the same skill set, right? So in the end, whether or not you want to have success and you want to impact the world, for you to have fulfillment and for you to have the impact that you really want, that skill set is necessary one way or another.
Totally.
Yeah.
All right, so I want to kind of dive into more high impact coaching and kind of get more insight. Before I do, I actually want to take a step back and unpack the box a little bit of what you just mentioned, like how powerful that is, and the value of not only a coach but also you investing in that, right? How we met was actually Empire Mastermind. This is a few years ago. Both of us enrolled in a very high ticket program. The investment for me at the time was $50,000, which was a ton of money, right? But I knew that investment would pay off, right? I trusted myself. I believed myself enough. I knew I didn't know the full way, but basically I knew in my heart of hearts, if I made that investment, if I invest in myself, then I can be more and ultimately serve more and ultimately then grow my business, right? And that's actually how we met. So, walk us through that initial journey before you actually made the leap of faith to kind of exit Cisco. What was the biggest value that you received in the coaching program that you joined? And I guess if you could provide some insight, what coaching program you joined?
Yeah, absolutely.
And how did you learn these skills?
So the first thing, and this is pre-Empire, right? Yeah.
So
one of the first things that I did, and this is kind of a shock to everybody, one of the first things that I ever did is I actually, as soon as I quit my job, my last day was July 31st, right? So my last day was July 31st. I took about 4 days completely off, turned off my phone, hung out with my family because I just needed to disconnect from the life in the Zander that was before and move into, really step into this new thing. When I turned my phone back on, the first thing that I did was I Googled Jack Canfield phone number, right? So Jack, I love Jack's books, the Success Principles, and a lot of his stuff. And same thing with John Maxwell. This was stuff that I used to study back in Air Force ROTC, right? And so the first thing I did, I was like, this guy knows it. This guy's a mentor to people. Like, I want to figure out what he does.
But he's most famously known for
Chicken Soup for the Soul.
right.
Yeah, so the guy sold, second to God, more books than anybody on the planet.
Wow.
So the first thing I do is I Google Jack Canfield phone number, and what do you know? I found something. So I called his office. I got a hold of his director of operations, Jody, and I remember talking to her for a little bit. And the first thing I said is, "Hey, my name's Zander Fryer. I just quit my job. Can I come hang out with you guys?" That was literally what I did.
Oh, Zander, I love you, man.
Literally what I did. So spent about 20, 30 minutes on the phone with Jody, ended up with the CEO of Canfield Organization, who's Patty Aubrey.
Okay.
Talked to her for a little bit, ended up on the phone with Jack for about 5 minutes. About 45 minutes later, I've got a flight out to Arizona.
Off a cold call.
Off of a cold call. And I'm packing my bags and getting ready to go the next day. So I fly out to Arizona. I end up spending the next 3 weeks with Jack's team and everything there. I end up, while I'm there, part of the reason that I spent the next 90 days investing in all these different programs was because while I was there, Jack helped me realize something that I want to share this with everybody because I think it's probably one of the biggest life lessons that I've ever learned. And, Bedros talks about this, Craig talks about this, everybody talks about it. People who pay attention.
People who pay attention.
People who pay attention. I joke that like when I joined Empire, putting up the $50,000, frankly, whether or not I learned anything new wouldn't have made a difference because putting up the $50,000 kept me accountable to take the scary actions to do that really mattered.
Amen.
Right? Like what I learned would have been irrelevant. And every time I learned something life-altering or had an epiphany moment, that was icing on the cake.
And I think it's so true, and interject here, because in my experience, being able to provide, some prospects, even some free coaching, this, that, and the other, those people take it less seriously than the ones who are actually investing themselves. 100%,
right? This is why, obviously now with a lot of my clients in the coaching space, the first thing that I tell them is look, before somebody pays you, you can't coach them. I forbid you. Because they're not going to be financially, mentally, or emotionally committed. Mm-hmm. How many times have you put out great coaching content on Instagram or somewhere and people don't implement it? Mm-hmm. Because they haven't said, yes, I am going to make, because every coaching, everything that you tell somebody to do is going to be uncomfortable. And unless somebody's committed to going through that discomfort by ponying up some cash or something like that, there's other ways to be committed, but paying for it is probably the easiest and most straightforward, right? But yeah, 100%, I think that was the big thing that Jack helped me realize. So while I was there, I ended up buying everything in his arsenal, right? So he was actually the first person that I really invested in because while I was there, I realized the immense power of investing in a program or in anything, because really what you're doing is you're investing in yourself. Mm-hmm. You're telling your subconscious, that 95% of your brain, hey, I'm serious about this. I'm not f***ing around. This isn't another Sunday morning idea that's just going to fall by the wayside, and I'm going to spend 10 years and I'm going to look back and be like, man, I wish I tried that thing.
You're right.
No, you're putting the money in, so you're committed and you're going to get out of your comfort zone and you're going to do the damn thing. So,
and that's so important, Zander, because not only for you to experience that, but the mindset of a coach, because when you have that mindset, when you lead your followers, then they end up getting better results.
100%. Yeah. And I think that was, again, I find myself, even at this point, like you mentioned, we'll do somewhere around 5 million this year. I never stop stretching myself to invest in something else that puts me out of my comfort zone. Up to this point, I've probably spent, I think, somewhere between $500,000 to $700,000 on my own coaching and personal development over the last 4 years. Mm-hmm. Right? So I've spent almost $1 million, and I continue to do it. And every year I do something bigger and more, that puts me out of my comfort zone.
But it just keeps on paying off.
But it keeps paying off because every time it's submitting to my subconscious and me as a person, hey, I'm serious about this. I'm going to make this happen. So
yeah, I think there's just a lot there, and I think it's just so impactful, and especially in our audience who want to be, successful coaches in the fitness space.
Yeah.
You have to be able to accept the coaching as well and take action on that, and then be able to, really charge what you're worth in order to get your client the best results.
I think that's so important, right? You have to make sure that you realize, you need to charge them and they need to be committed for them to actually get the outcomes that both you and they want.
Totally.
Right. So that's absolutely crucial.
Yeah. Love it, buddy. All right, well, transitioning now. I kind of derailed you, but from the high impact coaching. So we talked about launching it, but kind of give us the snapshot of the business, some of the highlights, and also nothing is all sunshines and rainbows. What are the challenges along the way?
Well, I think here's the deal, right? Like, as an entrepreneur, you're going to take a lot of shots and you're going to miss more than you hit, right? But that's part of the game, right? I think one of the things that's allowed me to scale, we've basically doubled every year for the last 4 years or whatever it is. And what's allowed me to continue at that pace is my willingness. I shouldn't even say my willingness, it's my wantingness to fail, right? So we've done so many things where I've messed up, but
Do you think that's your engineering background? Because if you look at engineers, like you're a scientist, right? And scientist is about trial and error.
So when I explain it to people, it's, if you think about it from a software standpoint, it's the agile model, right? So it's the agile model where like you have to go put out a minimum viable product that is frankly C- work at best, right? This is terrifying for a lot of people, right? Like if you're telling someone like you're going to go to the public and you're going to put out, and especially as a coach, right? When I'm not selling a yoga mat on Amazon. If I put up a yoga mat on Amazon and it gets 3.5 stars, you're like, okay, let me go read the reviews and adjust it and make it better. Well, what about when you're the yoga mat? Like you as a brand, as a face, and someone gives you 3.5 stars. Oh, no, because now I'm a terrible person. And my personal self-worth goes down if somebody says I'm 3.5 stars.
Of course, ego kicks in.
Right, so that's terrifying for people to put out C- work. But the reality is, like, as an entrepreneur, if you think that you're gonna put together A+ work right from the beginning, you are dead wrong, right? And I think one of the things that I was willing to do, and I think this is because of my engineering background, is like, I was willing to put out my best effort, my minimum viable product, my best effort at the time, right? And work my off to make sure that it got value to people, but then learn from it. Learn quickly, learn fast, take that agile model, like take any of the feedback that I got and feed it back into the system to get better, not a year from now, but that day, then that week, then that month. So you are constantly, like the only way to get this proper feedback is by putting yourself out there, by putting yourself into the market, by putting your product into the market and getting feedback quickly and adjusting fast. Right? Because you have to put C- work out to learn what C+ work is. Then you have to put out C+ work to learn B-, B- to learn B+, and so on and so forth. That's the only way to get there. So, frankly, like high impact coaching, everybody sees like, they're like, oh yeah, your business has doubled, every year for the last 4 years. Like you just poop gold or something, right?
Seems like it.
Right? No, absolutely not. Like I poop a lot of poop and occasionally get a gold nugget. But I think like, that's the thing is like people need to understand like I have more misses than successes. So like, and Bedros and I were just talking about this because he was joking about like a $500,000 mistake he made, and I was like, yeah, like I had probably like $130,000 mistake where we invested 6 months worth of work. Like 3 of my team members were doing this thing, and like 6 months, and 6 months later we're like, you guys, this is not going to work. We got to kill this thing, and that was like heartbreaking for me. But like spending 6 months on a project, $130,000, not just my time, but 3 other team members' times, right? That's so brutal. But like, we look at it and we're like, okay, let's make the tough decision, kill it, take the funds and resources, move forward, move on to the next thing. Right.
And as painful as that is, Zander, I mean, and you know this to be true, like anyone who you study that's super successful, that story right there, that's not a unicorn. I mean, that's just the formula for success.
It's mandatory.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think, kind of like we talked about, it's not even just a willingness to go through that, it's a wantingness. It's like, I actually, in my brain, I've worked on this belief for the last 4 years. By the way, I was not born with this belief. Like everybody's scared of failure. Everybody's scared of criticism. Everybody's scared of being judged, right? Like we all have that innate fear, right? But I had to work on this, and you work on this by doing little things, like little risks that you take. Like, okay, if I can go do this and I didn't die, let me see if I can go do a little bit bigger and not die, and then go do a little bit bigger, and okay, I survived that one too. Let's keep going.
Let's keep moving.
Right? Let's keep moving. But what I've found is every time that I go through a failure like that, on the other side is a monumental step up in myself as a leader and a monumental step up in the business in its ability to impact and the ability to produce wealth for myself, my family, my team, and everything that we do.
Yeah.
So.
Amen, man. Dive in a little bit more, because again, our audience, they're interested in being great coaches, starting a coaching business, specifically in the fitness industry. What would you say, in your experience of like developing and coaching coaches, is the biggest kind of disconnect or the skill set that a coach needs to acquire in order to be successful within their coaching practice? Sales.
It's going back to the sales conversation that we had. I think, and again, I'll take it a step further. If you're looking to get in the coaching space, sales equals leadership equals coaching. Mm-hmm. They are all synonymous, 100% of them, right? And so, again, I tell people that a really good sales conversation is a really good coaching conversation, right? And so the analogy that, and I taught this to the Fit Body Bootcamp team. Mm-hmm. I always think of, like, most people think of sales, they think of like Danny DeVito's character, that like salesy, manipulative guy, right? I like to think of a trusted advisor, mm-hmm. right? And when I think of a trusted advisor, I'm a bit of a nerd, so I think of Yoda, right? So I like to embody Yoda when I am both being a coach and when I'm doing sales. And what that means is, Yoda's...
Do you like step into that role?
I do. Okay. I literally, I will put on that hat. Yeah. I will not like put on ears or anything like that, but I will put on that hat. I will imagine myself being that trusted advisor, that wise figure that knows I know a lot, but it's my responsibility to help this person come to the realization themselves so that it sticks, mm-hmm. right? Like if you tell somebody something, it's an idea that can be rejected. If I help you come to the decision on your own, it's truth.
And that's so powerful, especially in our business when we're coaching a client nutrition program. Yeah. It's one thing just to prescribe a nutrition meal plan, but most times the client's not going to actually consume that, right? But you want to actually get their buy-in. You want to present some options.
They need to understand why. They need to understand the context. They need to understand the variables and the different options and what's best.
And then you want to actually get their buy-in as well, because then they're actually going to implement, right? Versus just 100%. Being prescribed and be like, it's uncomfortable, I can't do this, okay, I'm out.
Yep, and it's the same thing with your sales process. Right? It's the sales process is not me telling anybody to do. Mm-hmm. The sales process is helping somebody get to the truth mm-hmm. of what's really going on in their life, the hell that they're currently in, and where they really want to be, and being honest about the decisions that they've made to get there, which most people have not been honest about that. Most people numb themselves out from that issue, mm-hmm. right? But when you can help them get to that truth, right, and not try and hide from it, allow them to make the right decision. Allow them to have the support to make that decision on their own. And that's really what it's all about, being a trusted advisor. I'm also, the thing that I think about Yoda is like, Yoda's not going to tell you what you want to hear, right?
No.
And whether you're coaching or selling, you should not be telling people what they want to hear. You should be helping them realize what's really going on so that they can see they need to change. And then they make the decision on their own.
Cool.
Yeah.
High level, digging a little bit deeper, because not only did you train our sales team here at the franchise, but also helped us, you train our mastermind group, which is a high-level coaching program within our brand, which we then implemented to kind of be the framework of our sales approach, right? Yeah. So, the perfect consultation, if you will. So we modeled it off yours and a couple others, and we've now packaged them as strategy sessions, a really great coaching, kind of framework. What would you say is the framework of that perfect consultation?
Yeah, so I've learned this basically when I was selling at Cisco, when I was working with Disney. So basically, I took at Cisco what was a potentially 12 to 18 month sales cycle, mm-hmm. and I distilled like the theories of like what it really broke down to, and it essentially came down to like about 5 steps, right? And the first step is basically something that nobody ever guesses. But the first step goes back to like the energy that you bring to a conversation, how you approach the conversation, right? So most people, the first step in selling is like building rapport or like establishing something tactical. Yeah. No, it all comes back to like, are you the salesperson or are you the trusted advisor?
Just your energy.
Yeah, just your energy. And the way that I learned this, and you've heard this story before, but when I was 26 and I was in Cisco, I was an engineer, mm-hmm. and I was covering,
but with the gift of gab.
With the gift of gab,
that's a dangerous combo.
A talkable engineer. But basically, I was covering the Disney account at this point, and Disney had a couple account managers moved off the account over the last year or so, and so basically, my director was like, "Hey, like Zander, we need you to go in. We need you to go into the executive meeting. And I was like, I'm not a salesperson. They're like, yeah, just go in. Like, you've got to handle this one. And so I go into the executive meeting with Susan O'Day, the Disney CIO, and I still remember, I walk in, I'm a 26-year-old kid wearing a polo like this, backpack on, right? Like hands on my backpack, and I'm walking into this meeting, and she goes, great, Cisco's here. What are you going to sell us today? And I go, I don't know. And she's like, what do you mean you don't know? I go, I don't know. She's like, well, why are you here? And I said, honestly, like, I just kind of wanted to learn a bit more about your guys' business. If there's any way I can help out, let me know. Like, I'm here for you. And she goes, great, go ahead and take a seat. And she emails my director later that night and says, I think we'll keep this one around. So the first lesson I ever learned in selling was by not selling. I learned about just being the guy who wanted to learn and understand and care about this person. I still have a Disney badge. I can get into Disney parks, right? I don't even have my Cisco badge still. I have a Disney badge.
That's awesome.
Right? But they considered me a team member because when I came in, I cared about their end result. And there was a time we had like a $5 million deal on the table, and I told them not to take it because what we could deliver was only about 70 or 80% of what they really needed, and this other company could get the full 100%. So it was hard for me to say, like, yes, we can, we're the best choice. So I advised them not to take it. That's not advisable for most salespeople.
Right.
But 6 months later, we sold them like $29 million worth of networking equipment because we were the trusted advisor.
Because you did the right thing.
Because we did the right thing.
Yeah.
Right? But that being said, the other side of the table is, as the trusted advisor, when it came to down to that $29 million deal, and this was a big transformational deal, they were like, I don't know if we can do this. And, me and my team were basically able to say, like, you need to do this, right? Like, I know you need to do this. Like, they could trust us at that point, right? So again, yeah, if it's not a good fit, be open and honest. But if it is a good fit, you do not let your client fall into fear when they need to make the yes decision.
Which will better them,
which will better where they're going and everything that they're looking for.
Totally.
Yeah. So first step is really coming from the right energy and intention, and it's really embodying Yoda. We talk about like the doctor frame, embodying a doctor. Right? And so you're prescribing this, but really like coming from that frame of service and helping somebody get better with whatever ailments or whatever issues they have. So that's really the first step. The second step is rapport. Right? This one's pretty obvious. You have to have those communication skills, so the ability to connect. And I'm sure obviously you guys go into depth with like the really tactical stuff.
We do, and this is something I learned from you though.
Yeah.
When I teach rapport, this is straight from Zander's playbook. It's you use the analogy of like throwing a baseball, like going back and forth and kind of being in that catch, like that harmony, that rhythm, right?
Yeah.
And that's so important. You can't really just cut to the chase without building that rapport.
Well, the thing that I tell people, right, is like if you don't have rapport, it doesn't matter how good your pitch is. It doesn't matter how good everything else is. Like if somebody doesn't trust you and doesn't have that communication with you, it's very difficult to like get to a point where you're both in agreement that this is the next thing to move forward.
Yeah.
Right. Sometimes your pitch is so unbelievable that like the person could hate you, but they're just like, damn it, I don't care. That is rare.
But most times not.
Most times not.
Yeah.
So you have to have rapport. Second part is, any form of selling or marketing is you have to solve a problem, right? So the next part is get clear on someone's problem. Like
Which is so important because at least speaking for me, when I first got in the sales realm, it was uncomfortable for me to like prod at the problem. But really, at the end of the day, they're not buying for the sake of just buying. They're buying to solve a problem, and it's your job to uncover that problem.
And I think
so then you can present the solution.
And I think this is where if we're talking about the fitness space, this is where most coaches do not do a good enough job, right? Because most coaches will ask you. Let's say it's weight loss, right, or something like that.
Which is what we do here at Fit Body Bootcamp.
So most coaches will say, how much do you weigh? How much do you want to weigh, right? And then, maybe a couple other questions around like, what's your nutrition like, blah, 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 blah. And that'll kind of, I need to lose about 15 pounds or whatever it is, right?
Yep.
And that's really the surface of it, right? What I want to more deeply understand is why, and what is this weight issue caused you?
Right.
Right?
Because that's just the topic. That's just the symptom, right?
It's just the symptom. It's just the cherry. But the reality is like being overweight is like the root of all evil, right? Like, and it's funny because I was just talking to B about this. Like, weight loss really is a gateway drug to so many good things, right? On the other side of that, like being overweight is like the gateway drug to so many bad things.
Elaborate.
So being overweight will cause you energy and health issues, right? So if you can't have energy, how's that going to affect your kids?
Cool.
If you can't show up for your kids. If you're overweight, how's it going to affect your marriage, right? How many people out there have gotten divorced because the lack of sexual connectivity between a husband and wife fiddles out because they're, one or both of them have just lost it.
Countless.
Right? Countless. And, like I say this, not to be like a but just to be honest, right? We had one of our...
Because you're a good coach.
Yeah, because we had one of our clients who she was a weight loss coach, and she's like, Zander, I don't feel comfortable asking people about, their personal life and digging into like how their sex life is with their husband or anything like that. And I said, totally fine. But I will tell you that you're going to get somebody to come back to you that's going to come back to you, and they're going to have relationship issues because they didn't work with you. 3 months later, no joke, 3 months later, she came back to me. She's like, Zander, I'm going to dig deep. I was like, why? And she goes, I had a potential client that I talked to 3 months ago when we were first starting, and I just asked them the basics. How much do you weigh? How much do you want to lose? What's your nutrition like? She ended up not enrolling. She just got back to me and she said, Courtney, I need to work with you. And I said, why? And she said, my husband just asked for a divorce.
Ooh.
And he said it's because of my weight. She could have prevented that divorce 3 months earlier if she had just been willing to have the difficult conversation.
And pry into the problem.
And pry into the problem, right? The reality is like somebody's not making good decisions if they're, building themselves up to be 40, 50, 60 pounds overweight. They're not making the best decisions for their life.
No.
So if you allow them to keep making those decisions,
what do you think's going to happen?
What's going to happen?
Yeah.
People don't change unless they get so uncomfortable with their current reality they can no longer sit in it.
The pain has to be like at a threshold.
It has to hit a threshold. I tell everybody, like, we don't change until we hit rock bottom. And that's the truth. So I would rather, whether I'm a coach, like whether I'm coaching someone or whether I'm selling someone, because to me they're the same damn thing. Mm-hmm. Like if I were to do a sales call, I don't treat it any differently than when I'm doing a coaching call. My job is to help you realize why it's so important to make this change and then give you the tools to go make that change.
Yeah.
Right? So, if somebody's 40, 50 pounds overweight and you're not helping them realize all the bad things that they've done and all the things that it's costing them, right? They're not going to change. To get to 40, 50 pounds overweight, you literally have to do such a good job of numbing out your problem that you're pretending it doesn't exist.
Totally. And what I always teach, actually, there's two types of people that don't numb their pain. It's little kids and old people. They will tell you exactly what they feel.
Who are the two happiest types of people in the world?
Little kids and old people.
Little kids and old people.
On the flip side, though, you have Mrs. Jones, and bless her heart, and who's 60, 70 pounds overweight, and you ask her, like, hey, how's your nutrition? What's she going to tell you? Oh, it's great. I eat salad and chicken.
Good.
It's pretty good.
Pretty good.
Numb.
Yeah.
And that's just human nature. That's me, that's you, that's what we do as humans, right? That's no fault to anyone, but that's just the value.
But that's how we have to survive. Like, I would feel terrible about myself if I admitted that my nutrition is crap, that I'm 60 pounds overweight, that my sex life is dwindling or non-existent and has been for years, that I'm worried about chronic illness coming, or maybe I already have a chronic illness, that I'm not able to spend time with my kids. I haven't gone to my kids' baseball games in 3 years because I can't show up there huffing and puffing, right? Like, these are all the things that's going on in Mrs. Jones' life that she doesn't want to admit.
Totally.
But the moment that you help her get real on that, the moment she will view you as Yoda, and she will make all the changes that she needs to make.
Whew.
So that's the problem. So you've got your energy, you've got the rapport, you've got the problem. The next part is what I call qualifying. And this is something that most sales programs don't teach. And it's something from Cisco, but basically, say I'm working with Disney and I've got them on track for this $30 million of networking equipment, right? But for them to be successful, like, we've got to implement this whole thing. Mm-hmm. We've got to connect it all up. We've got to integrate it. We've got to do all these things. So like, before we make this sale, like, we've got to go to Susan and her team and be like, hey, for this to work, this is what we need, right? I need full unvetted access from my team to get access to the servers to make sure that we can implement and connect everything and do this. I need a weekly call with your engineering staff. I need a bi-weekly with you and the executive team to make sure that everything's working on point. And we need to do this for the next 3 months, right? And that's going to be what allows us to succeed there, right? And once this person basically says, like, yes, like, I can commit to that.
I can commit to that.
I can commit to that. then we can actually go through the pitch.
They're qualifying themselves, saying, I'm a fit for this program.
I'm a fit for this. I'm going to be willing to do the things that you need me to do to get success. And only then can I say, great, I can help you.
Because if not, then you can't.
Yeah.
And I
want to be confident when I tell someone like, hey, this is for you. Like, we're going to be able to get you results. I want to be confident in that.
Totally.
And I can't do that unless you've told me like, I'm going to be willing to do my part.
And Zander, what we've done at our franchise is we've take that qualification and typically it's a couple of qualifications questions we have is, hey, Mrs. Jones, I mean, it sounds like, what you've told me, you seem like a good fit. However, I want to make sure that we're on the same page. At the end of the day, fitness is simple. It's not easy.
Yeah.
Okay. Our program's not magic. You're going to have to show up 3 times a week and you're going to have to really sit into some conversations that sometimes are uncomfortable, but they're needed.
Yeah.
So in order for this to make this work, I need your commitment that you're willing to be coachable. Can I have your commitment on that?
Yeah.
So we've curtailed that qualification. There's 2 other questions within the mix, but it's so important and impactful because if a client's going to tell you, what, they can't make time, they can't make 30 minutes a day 3 times a week. If a client can't give me that, well then I can't help them, right? So that qualification perspective is huge. And to your point, if they can't qualify, then generally speaking, they're not a good fit. If they can, then with confidence, with assertiveness, you can say, all right, Mrs. Jones, you are a fit, let's go.
And I think one of the beautiful parts about qualifying a potential client, like at that point in the conversation, I always tell people, our clients always say like, oh, Zander, I don't even know if I should get this person on a sales call. I don't know if they're going to be a good fit. And my response is always, well, you don't know if they're going to be a good fit until you take them through that conversation and you ask those questions. Because I couldn't tell you how many people, as you go through this process, you create your perfect client. For the first, they may have not been actionable or coachable.
What do you mean by
they may
that?
not be actionable or coachable before, but as you go through this process, as you help someone get clear on their problem, they will mentally, this is coaching, they will mentally make the decision, crap, I need to change. And then when you ask those qualifying questions, are you willing to do this? And are you willing to do this? And are you willing to do this? They're saying, for the first time in my life, yes, I am. They're becoming your ideal client. Like you don't get people are always like, yeah, how do I get more ideal clients? Ideal clients don't just grow on trees. You don't just go pick them like apples. You create them. You create ideal clients by walking them through a proper conversation that influences them to realize they need to change and then making the decision to commit to actually doing it.
Cool.
Yeah. And then you can give your pitch and actually, all right, here's what we got. Yeah.
So after the qualification, then where we go?
That's the pitch.
That's the pitch?
Yeah. That's the easy part.
The
pitch is the easy part, but it's also
it really is though. It really is. If you've done the work,
if you've done it right, the pitch is the easy part, and it's also like we just talked about. It's actually only about 15% of the whole, 10% of the whole conversation.
And ours, I mean, it's literally 2 minutes.
For us, it's probably about 3 minutes.
Yeah.
Right? Of maybe a 45-minute conversation,
right.
So even less, 5%, whatever that is.
Yeah.
Right? But that's how much of the conversation is you actually quote unquote selling. The rest is coaching, deep conversations, and essentially, helping this person come to a point where you're not telling them, they're making the decision that I need to change.
And when they do, they are committed, and therefore you're going to get a better coaching client. You're going to produce better results.
100%. Everybody wants testimonials and raving fan clients, so you create them.
Ooh. Looking mind blown. Gold here, people, gold. All right. I want to kind of take us down, talk to us about you don't learn in college.
Sure.
You have to bleep that out, but in terms of the podcast you just launched, kind of give us what's going on with that.
Yeah, so kind of like we talked about, you don't learn in college, or SIDLIC. We'll call it SIDLIC for now. So SIDLIC was my original idea when I left the corporate world because I'd learned so many things, outside of college that really were what allowed me to start to be fulfilled, make more money, more meaning, and more freedom in my life. And so that was my first life coaching program was SIDLIC, right? That's what I was helping people with. There's all the things that you didn't learn in college to help you be more fulfilled in life. And obviously, as I transitioned to be, more business coaching and helping more coaches, because that ripple effect was so important for me, I realized that, the big mission behind everything that I do still is, I want to help 1% of this world live from more of a place of purpose and love and growth than from fear, right? And if I can help 1% of this world live more purposefully, I truly believe that we can solve a majority of the world's problems, the health problems of the world, the socioeconomic the systematic oppression and racism and everything. Like all of these problems can be solved, right? But we just have to be willing to be courageous enough to go solve them, right? And most of us don't act from purpose. We act from fear, right? And so that's really at the core of what you don't learn in college is about, because frankly, none of this stuff is taught in school, right?
Zander, interject here, but I feel like there's so much there, and I feel when you're operating.
Do we need to start another podcast? We can start a whole new episode here and just keep going.
Media's like, yeah, I love you guys right now. But really, what I got from that is when you're operating at fear, that's like limbic. You're like you're tapping into your animal self.
100%.
But when you're operating at a purpose and impact, you're an evolved human. You are operating you're vibrating a different energy.
Well, if you think about it, right, like the part of your brain that leads to fear-based decision making is the amygdala. It's the part of the brain that literally prevents us from being eaten by a short-nosed bear or a saber-toothed tiger.
Right.
Right. Now, I don't know if you checked the bathroom. There are no saber-toothed tigers here. Like, we're fine. Yet when, exactly. But when people get on stage to speak in front of an audience, so glossophobia is one of the biggest fears.
Is that speaking
in front of an audience. Now, we all know that we're not going to die if we speak on stage.
We all know this.
We know this, but might get a heart attack or something if you're really that scared. But you shouldn't die if you get on stage and you speak in front of an audience, right? But what happens? Your adrenaline spikes in case you need to fight the saber-toothed tiger. You get sweaty, you get and it's a very specific type of sweat that smells and tastes bad, right, to the saber-toothed tiger in case he tries to eat you. Your eyes widen so you can find the saber-toothed tiger. Blood rushes to your arms and your legs in case you need to fight or run. And no joke, you get ready to evacuate your bowels so that you can be lighter in case you need to run from the saber-toothed tiger. This is why you hear stories of people before, boxers or UFC fighters before a big fight, they'll feel like they need a crap, right? It's because literally that's your fight or flight response, emptying your bowels. So this happens to you in today's society, even though we know that we're not going to die from speaking on stage.
Correct.
So learning how to reprogram that is just part of it, but there's a whole set of skills, there's a whole set of practices that we are never taught anymore on how to become individually contributing members of society. And I dig into this in depth in the book, and I talk about this in my podcast. But if you go back as far as Greco-Roman times, Plato and Socrates really is where this was developed. There's the idea of, have you heard of the trivium?
No.
So there's an idea, it's called the trivium, and it's the core of the liberal arts, and the trivium is grammar, logic, and rhetoric. And basically what they used to say, what Plato and Socrates and Greco-Roman times used to say, is that when you master these three things, not just learn them, master these three things, you become a contributing member of society. Now let's take a deeper look at what those three things are. The reason grammar was important was because it was the ability to learn on your own, right? So when you learn grammar, you have the ability to learn on your own. The next one is logic, right? So the ability to reason on your own, to think, critically think. Well, actually, and the next one is rhetoric, which is take in the information that you're learning and that what you're reasoning, and then you critically think about it, process it, and put it out in your own way, right? So that's grammar, logic, and rhetoric. When you master these three things, you can become an individually contributing member of society.
And what's this teaching called again?
So this is the trivium.
The trivium.
And then when you look a little bit further forward into imperial Rome, when Rome becomes this expansionistic society, militaristic society, well, what makes a terrible soldier? Somebody who can learn on their own, somebody who reasons on their own, and someone who critically questions constantly, right? So this method of education is done away with for what's called outcome-based education, which is actually the education that we still use today, right? Now, obviously, we don't have a militaristic expansionist society, but we do have an economic expansionist society, right? And this is what we see is our education system is designed to create cogs. It's designed to create worker ants that fit in this almost militaristic-like economic society.
Totally.
Right? And what we're realizing now, and we've realized this more and more over the last couple of decades, is everybody's done with that. Like, nobody wants to be a cog. Nobody wants to be put into that cookie cutter mold. There's a reason, Forbes did a study. It's like 83% of people who are in 9-to-5s are either unhappy, unfulfilled, or completely disconnected from their job. 83. 4 out of 5.
Ooh.
1 out of 5 is actually happy and fulfilled.
That's nuts.
How bad crazy is that?
Nuts.
Right? It's nuts. But all of this is because our education system was built to create a big machine rather than individuals who are like happy and fulfilled and
critically think
and learn on their own and all of these things.
Express their ideas. And
so that's really why I came back to Sidlick and this whole idea is because frankly I think the education system is ripe for disruption. So that's where we're going.
I agree.
Yeah.
And you're going to be the man to do it.
And I'm going to be the man to do it.
I love you, Zander. You're freaking awesome. Well, my friend, dude, we're going to have to do another one because I got so much more, but I know you're a busy CEO of your company and I don't have too much time with you, but I'm going to transition to the lightning round if you're up for that. So you
Let's
can
do it, man.
Basically fire on some piece of knowledge bombs.
I'll get ready.
All right, here you go. Passion. I feel like we're both passionate guys. What's the biggest thing that you are passionate about today and why?
Two things. Number one is my wife.
Beautiful lady from Australia, which I actually just, as of yesterday, have an Australian nephew. My wife, Tatiana, basically her sister lives out there, so we have a little something in common.
Yeah, so, I think, growing my business was the first step in my personal growth journey, and then my wife was really the person that allowed me to grow as an individual, as a husband, in my relationships, in my ability to love, everything like that. So, very passionate about her, everything that we do, and building the life together as we continue on this journey. It's just been, it's amazing. It's cool to go do amazing stuff and have a big impact. But it's legendary to be able to do it with somebody that really inspires and motivates you.
Good on you, man. And you work together.
And we work together. She's in the business. So everybody that says don't have your family in the business, I'm like, I like to work with people that I love working with and hanging out with. So why not work with my wife, right? Yeah. So that's number one. And then number two is Sidlick. That's the big thing for me. This podcast, the book coming out, creating that movement is really what I'm going for, and it's going to be a big part of my focus for the next 5 to 10 years. So
good on you, man.
Yeah.
Next up, prior to all the success that I'm looking at with the Zander Fryer here today in the studio, looking back at the younger version of you, what was the big obstacle in your way, and how'd you overcome it?
Oh man. Well, I wouldn't say prior to the success, and you kind of alluded to this. This was kind of in the middle of the launch. About 6 months into me launching my business, my best friend actually took his own life. And so that has been probably the hardest thing that I've ever had to deal with. And also, and this sounds really weird, probably one of the best things I've ever had to deal with. Yeah. Here I was, somebody who'd helped people through PTSD and depression and suicidal tendencies. And then my best friend kills himself. And I couldn't help AJ. So that sent me into a deep depression. It sent me into a dark place, and I will say that having to go through that has to be one of my greatest gifts, because now I know what people have gone through to get there, and I feel like I enjoy life at a different level because of it. I love every day because of him and losing him. And I connect with people on a deeper level because of him and losing him. And I'm more passionate and driven about everything that I'm doing because I know that tomorrow could be my last day, right? I knew that before when I had the conversation with my mentor, but I didn't really embody it until I lost AJ. And that was the thing that let it all sink in. It's like, tomorrow could be my last day. Am I living today purposefully? So, that's been the hardest thing that I've had to go through. But, I look back and this sounds really weird, but I wouldn't change it for the world.
Yeah, well, I'm a big believer in Stoic philosophy and that memento mori, you're going to die. And, it's kind of it can be a dark message, but also can be a bright message if you take the proper action.
Well, it's the truth. We are all going to die.
It's the truth.
Right? So the sooner that you can accept that, the sooner you can start to live. Yep.
Zander, you are in the business of giving incredible advice. What would you say would be one of the best pieces of advice that you've ever received, and why?
There's a big list.
This wasn't gonna be easy, buddy.
One of the best pieces of advice that I've ever received. I would have to go back to that day, that day that my mentor mentioned that, and he said, every moment is either on purpose or off purpose, and every moment off purpose is a moment wasted. It's been a piece of advice that stuck with me for 5 years. It's been a piece of advice that I literally live my life by today. Right? It's like, I go back to all my decisions. I ask myself, am I making this decision out of purpose, or am I making this decision out of fear? And every time when I can ask myself that, and I can honestly say this is a courageous, purposeful decision, I've never been unhappy, I've never been unfulfilled, and I feel like every time I do that, I end up more successful and more amazing stuff happens to me.
Awesome, buddy. We teed this up a little bit, but I want to tee this up for you since you have an awesome book coming out.
Yeah.
So I would say, what's your best book of recommendation? You better lay this down.
Yeah, so it has to be You Don't Learn in College. It'll be coming out this October, so October 2021. So be on the lookout for You Don't Learn in College. But that's got to be the book of the year.
Beautiful.
Yeah.
All right, Mr. Fryer, one last piece of parting advice that you can share with our audience of all the experience that you learned from growing businesses to being, super successful to becoming an incredible leader, salesperson, coach. What would be the best parting piece of wisdom that you're going to leave our audience with today?
I think if you're thinking about getting into the entrepreneurial world, or maybe you are in the entrepreneurial world and maybe you're new to it, the thing that I would say is take action sooner. Right? Like nothing comes planning. No amount of success can come from planning and preparing. So take action sooner, take action before you're ready. Start today, start yesterday. Like just go do the thing, because you will learn more from jumping in a pool and trying to swim than you will learn from like studying the textbook on how to swim from Michael Phelps any day of the week.
Amen.
Right? You have to jump in the pool. You have to you have to flounder and you have to mess it up. So just jump in and just go do the damn thing.
Zander, my friend, tons of knowledge today. Where can our audience find you?
Sure. Just go to zanderfryer.com or look me up at Zander Fryer on Instagram. Those are probably the two best places.
Dude, man, this has been so awesome. Dude, I love hanging out with you.
Yeah.
And I want to just acknowledge you real quick, man. It's been a pleasure working with you and knowing you, becoming friends with you for the last few years. And I'm so impressed with who you are, with the level of success that you've achieved. And more importantly, I just love you, man. Your energy is contagious, and you've added a ton of value to me, to our audience. And just from my personal life, I appreciate your friendship and so grateful for you being on the show today.
Absolutely, man. Thanks for having me, Bryce.
Boom. All right, friends. Well, thank you so much. Hopefully you enjoyed this episode. And as always, please don't forget to like and subscribe this video on YouTube. And of course, please drop us an awesome review on iTunes. We'd be so, so grateful, as that would mean a lot to us. Thanks so much, and you guys have a great day.